Okay, if we could start the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, and thank you Northeast School for hosting us this evening. It's nice to see a large crowd here tonight. We'll start the meeting with item 1.0, which is the consent agenda. Do I have a motion on the consent agenda, please? Mr. Nicholson? I have a motion to move the consent agenda. Is there a second? Mr. Kemp? I have a motion and a second to move the consent agenda. Mrs. Fisher?
I'd like to pull C, please.
Full item C. Does anybody else have any items on the consent? Mrs. Gold? C and A. And are there any other items? Okay, so we're going to vote on consent agenda. Item B, make a motion, ask for a... Thank you. Sorry. I'll speak closer to the mic so everybody can hear me, if everybody around the table would do the same. Motion is to 1.1B for approval. All in favor? And that's unanimous. Item, we'll go in order. A, Ms. Goldich.
It's only a question, Mr. Boone, page 6. On 6.3, the graduation requirements. I wasn't here for this meeting. Was the discussion, did you have a discussion about whether or not hours earned during summer would count?
That was part of the discussion, yes.
And they will? Yes.
That is the plan, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so if there's no other adjustments, I would look for a motion to approve item 1.1A. Scourge, okay.
So moved.
And do we have a second? Mr. Kemp, let's see the second. Any further discussion on 1.1A? Seeing none, all in favor? And that's unanimous. Okay, Ms. Fisher, you have item 1.1C.
On page 3, the last motion at the bottom of the page, I would actually ask Trish to check our tape, because I believe I made that motion. Maybe Mrs. Arnold remembers better than I do.
Not a clue.
No. So I was pretty sure I made that motion.
That was on page 3, you said?
Yeah, the bottom of the page, to add the grade 2 Maple Street school teacher.
Okay. So do we want to table this until next meeting and we can validate that through the tape, or are we comfortable in making the adjustment? Do we... It's up to the board. I mean, Mrs.
Well, I
Simon?
think we should table it until it can be verified, just to be safe.
I would think that would be probably the best thing to do. So if we could have a motion, that would be, someone wish to make that, Ms. Fisher?
I'll move that we table this until our next meeting.
I have a motion to table until the next meeting. Is there a second? Mr. Kemp. A motion and a second to table 1.1C until the last item on page 3 can be verified. All in favor of that motion? And that's unanimous. So that's tabled until it can be verified. All right, that takes care of consent agenda. Item 2.0, which is our secretary's report. Item 2.1, opportunity for Board of Education to add or delete agenda items. Does anybody have any agenda items to add or delete this evening? Mrs. Arnold.
I'd like to request a discussion about board committees and board meeting structure for the next meeting, please. And I'd like to ask if the information that we received about the coaching issue with the high school, if that's something that we can talk about.
Okay, so the first item that you're requesting, board committees and meeting structure.
Yes.
What kind of dialogue, or what is the intent of that.
Oh, sure.
Just, if you can just
Okay.
give us a little background on what that is, and we're looking for a second on this.
Okay. We have committees that meet. I'll use curriculum as an example because I'm on that committee. We meet to recommend to the full board to approve curriculum, and that's not an expertise that board members have. I think it's a nice gesture, but we have yet to say to the administration, no, we don't want to do that. My suggestion would be that it might be more appropriate to simply bring those recommendations to the full board. We don't meet that frequently, so it's not an issue of meeting time, it's an issue of being more efficient in my opinion. And I would say that probably is true for, in my opinion, a couple of the other committees, the way we function. So I was hoping that we could just talk that through.
So that's the motion to add as a future agenda item to talk about next meeting, talk about the committees and the structure. Does anybody wish to second that motion? Ms. Golich, I have a motion and a second. Discussion on that motion. Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. Sorry. All in favor? And those opposed? And show one opposed. The motion does carry. Thank you. Okay, so that would be on a future next agenda item.
And before I make a motion, I wanted to ask whether it is appropriate for the board to have the discussion about.
There are certain logistics that we have to follow, but this will give the superintendent time to put together some information, and I have some thoughts that I will follow up with Dr. Conway, make sure that we get the right information out to all members so we have a good discussion about that.
The information that we just received isn't the information?
I'm sorry, I apologize. This is the email you're
Yes.
talking about.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I don't know if all board members have seen the communication that came through. But
My question is really about the appropriate, is it appropriate? I assume because it came out in email that it's not privileged information.
no, that's
It's not-
public. It's
okay.
public information. As soon as she
Okay.
mails that letter, I mean, that letter is.
Then I'll move that we add this as an agenda item to our next board meeting.
So, talk about the coaching situation. And do I have a second on that motion? Ms. Golich, I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? Mr. Kemp?
I haven't read any of this yet. I don't want to vote for it or against it because I don't know what it consists of. There may be some sensitive items, there may be people discussed, and they would have the right to be here, so whether it should be an executive session or not, I have no idea. So I'm just absolutely neutral on this. I think it's, I don't know whether it's appropriate or not, without any idea what the contents of this is, so I'll abstain.
Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, go back to Ms. Hunt.
Could I just comment that that was my question to Dr. Conway, does it require executive session? And her answer was no.
No.
So that's why I propose a regular session, an agenda item for the regular session. There wouldn't be a reason to be concerned with Mr. Kemp's concerns.
If there's no other discussion, I'll bring that motion to a vote, and that is to add a discussion regarding the coaching situation and the response from Dr. Conway per future board meeting and future next board meeting. How about that? All in favor? And those opposed? And those abstaining? And that motion does fail. It's 3-2 and 1 abstention. Did you get that? Thank you. Are there any other board members wishing to add or delete agenda items? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 2.2, which is the Rockville High School Student Representative Report. Good evening, Olivia. You seem so far away for some reason.
Good
You have the
evening.
floor.
It is pretty empty tonight. So the end of fourth quarter, or the beginning of fourth quarter has just arrived, and that means AP tests are just around the corner, so we're really buckling down and preparing as best we can, and hopefully we'll receive good marks like we have for the past couple of years. Spring sports are in full swing, and we are actually holding a spring sports rally this year, and that's really exciting because usually we only have a winter pep rally, so we'll get to recognize some of the teams that don't usually get that recognition. The cupcake wars went off, and we had a lot of people make it through to the next round, which was really exciting to hear all their names on the announcements. And as I'm sure you're aware, NASC is coming soon, and I know a lot of teachers and students and faculty have been working really hard, and I know RHS is working really hard to set a positive example and a positive environment for these people to witness. And we are going to be doing the smart balance testing, which is, I wouldn't say exciting, but it's going to be interesting to see what CAPT is going to be replaced by and all the new ways of testing that are coming about. Also, I just wanted to let the board know that I'm aware that there are climate surveys out on the public website. However, I don't know what means they were supposed to be told to students and parents to take these climate surveys, but I know a lot of students and a lot of parents aren't aware that they're out there. So I just wanted to let you know that the message really isn't being received in our community. So thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for our student representative this evening? Seeing none, thank you for your report. All right, moving on to item 3.0, which is the opportunity for comments on the agenda items, potential future agenda items, or general information provided to the Board of Ed or from citizens and community organizations. Is there anybody who wishes to speak to the board this evening? Please come forward, state your name and address for the record.
Julie Garceau, 14 Olson Drive. I really don't have much to say other than I wanted to thank you guys for coming and having your meeting here. And as I've said before, I would really like to see more things like this happen. So as you're planning for next year, I don't know what other people think about it, but I would like to see the same setup. If we could be at every school once a month or however you did it. And also let you know that there's lots of snacks, Mr. Kemp. So there's some snacks, some free samples from PTO today, if you guys want to check out. So, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak to the board? Please come forward, state your name and address for the record.
Diana Nambo, 8 Northview Drive.
Could you pull the mic a little closer, please? Thank you. Just want everybody to hear your comments.
I wanted to comment on the school-based health clinic. The Maple Street PTO is in support of this. We feel it will benefit our community greatly. We think it will help our parents and our students to have health clinic right on premises so they can get what they need. Many of our parents don't have transportation and can't get to doctors when they have sick children. So I would like to ask the board to consider this favorably. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak to the board this evening? Please come forward, state your name and address for the record.
Hello, it's Brian Flint, 4 Longview Street, and I'm a part-time employee of the Vernon school system. I want to thank you for providing this forum. I also am speaking in favor of the school-based health center at Maple Street School. My background is that I work with the school system in a role called the School Family Community Partnership. And what's interesting about that is if you look at the mission statement for the school system, it's working the school with the family and the community. When you look at your different 1, 2, and 3-year goals, and the vision is all of us working together. So in my role, I think I was chosen for this because I work with a lot of the different groups in the neighborhoods. I worked originally 10 years ago, I was the president of the Rockville Downtown Association. When they didn't want to cover the neighborhood issues of Rockville, we started the Rockville Community Alliance, and I was the president of that group. We work with the VCN, which is the Vernon Community Network. I work with Rockville Church of Nazarene, where we have a Friday night program called The Rock, where we have 140 students sometimes from Rockville, ages 5 to 11, come to our church over here. And I just mentioned these different backgrounds because no matter what meeting you go to, and I go to meetings at the state level, I go to some regional meetings, we do a lot of town meetings. The problem is that Vernon has a very unique problem, and it's caused by poverty. If you look at your school system and which schools are doing the best on the scores, the highest poverty level is on the lower side, and the inverse. Senator Don Williams in the state of Connecticut, when he was saying how the 30 alliance districts were chosen, he said, look at the poverty. The towns that are in the 30 are the highest in poverty. There's people who deny that poverty is an issue. There's people who still blame all the teachers. I also got an opportunity to work as a para at Maple Street School last year for a short time. And I thought I knew what was going on. But when I saw the dedication of the teachers and the dedication of the paras and the school psychologists, all the social workers, there's a big problem going on here. But the reason I'm here is I'm encouraged because we're doing the right things. We have started a community school program at Maple Street. We didn't know how we were going to do it. We knew that it was taking place all over the world, all different countries. In the U.S., did it. No one around here was doing a community school. We tried it. We did it on a shoestring. Thank you to the Board of Ed for supplying one person to do that. There's a lot of volunteers. It's working. We wanted to start a bookmobile. This is the dream of Dr. Lois Bissell. At one of our meetings with the Rockville Community Alliance, she said, you know what? I wish we had a community school. I wish we had a bookmobile. I wish we had a community garden. I wish we got the community more involved. She had that vision, and we did all four things. This school-based health center is something that's really new to our area. I don't know where the closest one is. I don't know if Manchester has one or not. But listening to all the hearings at the state legislature on CTN, Channel 98, this is something that they're determining. It is sad that the educational system has to take care of the health of our children. But if no one else is, and if your goal is to educate these children, we have to do something. If this were coming in front of the board and asking you to put together $500,000 to put out of your budget to make this happen, that would be a great debate. But if there's an outside concern who is able to get the funding for this, and there's going to be details to work out, I admit that, I think everyone admits that. But if they're offering this money to make this happen, there's not a single person, I think, at Maple Street School, and I also work with Northeast School part-time too, all of them know that we have to address the health issues. Are there these problems, those problems? I know our finance director, Michael Pacaro. I've known him for years. I know the things that he did in the state. If there's a problem, you deal with it. You find out what the issues are, and if we want to make this happen, you have to trust the people we hire to do the right things. I have full confidence that if this goes forward, it will be only after every I is dotted and every T is crossed. But this can happen. It doesn't have to happen, but I really don't think another time that a group's going to come in and offer to take care of the money themselves to make this happen. This is an opportunity that's in front of us now, and I just beg you, beseech you, to make this opportunity to vote positive on this, because this can help the entire school system. Thank you.
Thank you, Vernon. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak to the board? Please state your name and address for the record. Thank you.
Christina Greenwood, 246 South Street. I wrote this letter this afternoon. It is on Monday, April 8th, a 5th grade student from Northeast School had a BB gun on his possession during the school day. During the bus ride home, this BB gun was used to threaten other students on bus number 15. According to my son, who rides bus number 15, this 5th grader was asked another student on the bus a question, and when the other student didn't answer in the manner he wanted, the 5th grader then pulled the BB gun out of his backpack and threatened her to come over his house after getting off the bus. My son was sitting across from this 5th grader. My son and about 5 other students were threatened not to tell anybody about the BB gun, or this 5th grader would beat them up. Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, on those evenings, my son was not acting in a normal demeanor. I asked if anything was upsetting him, and he denied the issues. He was having emotional outbursts of crying each day while trying to do homework and playing at home. Then on Wednesday, April 10th, my husband received a call from the school social worker, that my son was questioned regarding the incident at school. My son was never asked if he was threatened by the student. The police were not notified until we did so ourselves on Thursday morning. This 5th grader has been causing disruption in the school and bullying many others throughout the year at Northeast. This fifth grader has brought a knife to school in the past and also brass knuckles. If you guys are not aware, the CT General Statute, Section 53A-3, states that brass knuckles are a deadly weapon. I have many unanswered questions for the school and administration. First, why was the police not notified? Second, why was the parents of the Northeast students not notified? All that would have been necessary was a simple memo, possibly from the principal or superintendent, about this incident, while maintaining confidentiality. Third, how do you plan to keep my child safe? As a result of Sandy Hook Elementary shooting, we are all aware of how vulnerable our young children are. My children know that weapons are not allowed in school. A fifth grader is old enough to know that there are consequences to his actions. Now it is up to the administrators to enforce these consequences, or else we are creating a society that says that it's okay to break the law. If you can get away with defiant behavior now as a child, this only leads to further commitments of more violent crimes. This fifth grader has created fear in other students. My own son would not share the details of this incident with me until I asked him. How do you plan to keep the others safe in the school? As a parent, I expect this fifth grader to be removed from the bus system. I expect this fifth grader will be expelled from the elementary school and placed in alternative schooling. I want answers, and I will continue to fight for the rights of my son and criminal punishment if necessary.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak to the board this evening? Please state your name and address for the record.
Tanya DeMero, 138 Grove Street. I too would like to thank you for coming out to the schools. I personally think it's been a huge success this year. I think the parent population has really come out, and I think it's helped them. So thank you for making, I know it's kind of weird with all the technology, but it's been awesome in my opinion. I have a couple questions. Following Mrs. Greenwood, I also have some questions regarding the communication for the incident that occurred at Northeast. It was vaguely mentioned at a PTO meeting, and then we heard nothing else about it. So, and it wasn't mentioned by administration, it was mentioned by the school psychologist at the PTO meeting. So it is a little disheartening to think that we can't be notified when we got a call when there was a bullet found at Rockwell High School. The whole district got that call, so I think that we could have done that, whatever it's called. I call it the robocall, I don't know what it's called. I have a question regarding the seat positions that we're asking for in the budget. I'm not sure they're required, but is it that it's such a new system that our administrators are doing too much that they can't implement it? Or is there a reason why we have to have those positions? I'm just looking at the budget and things that might be able to be cut to help us get to the number we need to. I'm also going to request that possibly school uniforms come up as a topic for the Board of Education. It was brought up heavily in the community conversation that we recently had. It's also been brought up in the school choice survey results that are in your board packet this evening. So it's a conversation, or maybe another survey could be sent out to see what the mindset of our community is. So the other question I have is, can Alliance grant dollars, can technology be used, purchased under those dollars? Because I'm just thinking that those are things that we purchase not necessarily every year, but it would impact our town budget less, in a sense that it's not something we need to have every year. Like full day kindergarten is something we have to plan for and budget for every year. So it's just a thought. And then this, I don't know how to say this nicely, so I'm just gonna say it. We have a lot of pilot programs that we get in the district, and I get maybe some schools are better at researching them or getting them, but it just seems like they're not diversified across the district as well as I'd like to see them. Every school is struggling in some way, shape, or form. Some are struggling more than others. So I would just like to see, we hear that we're not a system of 7 islands, we're a systemic island. I think I'm saying that correctly. So, and I feel like my school, which is Northeast, is being left out of those pilot programs. I'm selfish right now. I'm looking for anything that will help us succeed. So I'm just asking, when pilot programs come in, I get that maybe one administrator at another school or other schools may be doing that research, but we are a system. And sometimes we have to share, and Sometimes we want our schools to succeed, but everyone needs to be looked at. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak this evening? Please come forward, state your name and address for the record.
Hi, my name is Sherry Koss. I live at 3 Fern Street. I want to thank you for coming here and doing this tonight because it allows me to be involved a little bit more with my daughter's school and things that are happening in the community when I don't always have that opportunity when they're held in downtown Rockville. I just wanted to kind of support what's been said about these incidences that are happening in the school and the lack of notification for parents. I know this is not the first incident that's happened at this school, and the only thing that I'm hearing is through my 10-year-old, and that is a whole different perception than what actually happens sometimes. There have been other incidents that have happened at this school, and again, I'm only hearing it from my 10-year-old. And I don't think these are the things that should be coming out of my 10-year-old's mouth. You know, I am fortunately or unfortunately on my way out of the Northeast school doors. I love this school and I support this school with everything that I can. But I really feel like a lot of the communication between the things that are happening within the walls of the school are not always portrayed to the parents, and they need to be. As previously stated before me, we hear about things that are going on in Rockville High School. I, at this point, don't have an investment in Rockville High School. I want to know what's going on in my daughter's school and my daughter's day-to-day. I know last year she'd come home crying because there were kids that were just absolutely horrific in school. My daughter loves school, and for her not to want to come to school, that's not good. That's not good. So hopefully the board will look at the communication or lack thereof between Northeast School and all I can speak of is about Northeast School. I don't have a child anywhere else. I just know that there is a lack of communication between what goes on here and what is, you know, what is being sent home to us. So thank you for your time and thank you for coming.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak this evening? Seeing none, we're going to close community forum. Yes, sir.
I realize there's not a vehicle for this, Mr. Poole, but I think it would be just wrong for us not to address the issues that were brought before us tonight, not in a dialogue, I understand that, but in the name of our goal, which is to build and improve relationships and partners in our community, sounds like we're not doing a very good job. And I think that it would be wrong for us to ignore the comments of some of these parents and not have a discussion. The only thing I can request of you is a rule bending and ask that we add an agenda item to address those concerns this evening, to at least acknowledge them, understand what we've heard, and make some requests of the superintendent. So I would ask that you would allow the addition of an agenda item.
I need to just clarify that we do have information that we can share, because I believe there is some information that is being researched, but I don't know if we have. Can we share any information on the situation that occurred on the bus?
No, we cannot.
That is.
Not do that with the board at this point.
Yeah, I was gonna say right now legally, administration is dealing with this issue, and until they can communicate that to us, I don't think we can have that discussion, because we don't have any facts on it. And
I'm not talking specifics, I'm talking in general. If those parents don't like to hear things from their children, I don't like to hear things that I think should come from the administration. I don't like to go to a board meeting and be informed by the community when I should be informed by administrators. That's the discussion, not the particulars, but we are failing at communicating, and I think we need to address it.
I acknowledge what you've said, and I think the community needs to understand that, we will communicate that with them, and we will look into the communication issues. That's all we can do at this point.
No, we can talk about it.
Thank you. We'll move on to item 5.0. I'm sorry, 4.0 at this point in time, to personnel. Item 4.1, appointment of new assistant superintendent, and Dr. Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Hull. I would like to introduce Mr. Jeffrey Burt to the Board of Education. He is the finalist for the position of assistant superintendent, so I'd ask him to come forward to the table if he would. As he comes forward, I'd like to give you his background. Mr. Burt has a bachelor's degree in history. He has a Master of Arts in Social Studies that he received at Columbia. His 6th year in Administration and Supervision is from Sacred Heart University. He is receiving his certificate in Executive Leadership from the University of Connecticut School of Education, the NEAG School, in August. He was a social studies teacher for several years and assistant principal at Tile Middle School in Montville. He is currently in Fairfield as the social studies curriculum leader, the K-12 coordinator for instructional technology, and the K-12 library media coordinator. He had outstanding recommendations, energy and enthusiasm, and a true desire to work with curriculum instruction and assessment, which is what this position is. So I would recommend him to the board.
Thank you. Board members, I don't know if you have any questions or whether or not you wish to have a conversation in executive session. It's your pleasure. Does somebody wish to make a motion of any form? Ms. Fisher.
I move that the Board of Education approve the appointment of Mr. Jeffrey Burt as assistant superintendent.
Ms. Bush.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to appoint Mr. Jeffrey Burt as the assistant superintendent. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I'm going to call for a motion. All in favor? And it is unanimous. Thank you. And welcome. You have the microphone if you'd like to say anything.
Good evening. I want to say hello to everybody. Again, my name's Jeff. Please feel free to communicate me, email me anytime. Also, I'd like to say hello to everybody. I haven't met everybody at the board, so hopefully over the next few months I'll be able to get the opportunity to meet you personally. I do want to say thank you to everyone who's on the interview committee. I also want to say thank you to the board and the superintendent for giving me this wonderful opportunity. I do want to say thank you to my wife and children who are unfortunately unable to make it tonight. They had to go to a doctor's appointment. Finally, I am very excited about being here and working with the folks here in Vernon, looking at the many opportunities and challenges that are ahead of us. So again, once again, thank you very much.
Welcome again. Thank you. Moving to item 4.2. This is a review and approval of the 2012-2013 superintendent evaluation process. Dr. Conway or Ms. Fisher, I'm not sure.
Who can start? Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Hull. Last year, at the end of the year, the board asked for a 360-degree evaluation, which involves an outside evaluator coming in and speaking to people on a series of standards or goals that have been set. So we only knew at that point of a person named Rosemary Darcy, who used to live in Connecticut, now lives in Rhode Island. Since then, we've now learned of another person, so we'll certainly bring that person to the board as well. But Ms. Darcy has been emailing back and forth with me. And what her process is she comes in and interviews a number of people around either leadership standards or goals. It depends which.
She's done this for a few other people in the state of Connecticut. She then prepares those are individual interviews. She then prepares a report for the board, and the board then takes that. She can meet with the board as well, and then the board reviews that. To complete the 360-degree evaluation, in addition, we have looked at leadership standards based on the Oregon state model of supervision, or supervision evaluation for superintendents. And so there's a series of leadership standards that the board would rate the superintendent on. And then there's also, I set 3 goals for myself based on the goals you all gave me in my last year's evaluation. I have 3 overarching goals that I had set for myself based on those. And so you would also rate achievement based on those 3 goals. So in that way, it's kind of all encompassing. And Ms. Darcy, we emailed back and forth last week, so she is waiting for this to be approved so she can move forward with that. Mrs. Fisher has anything to add?
No, I think that covers it. We had discussed doing this 3-part evaluation, but I don't think we ever officially approved it. 2 parts were done by the Board of Ed, and the 3rd part was the 360. So it's just a matter of approving it now, and we can move forward with it.
Do you want to put a motion on the floor, and then we can have a discussion?
Okay, I will move that the Board of Education approve the 2012-13 superintendent evaluation process.
And do I have a second on that motion? Mrs. Bush?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the superintendent evaluation process for 2012 and 13. Is there any discussion on the motion? Ms. Goldich?
I believe we added...
Please put your mic closer.
I believe we added some specific metrics to the superintendent's goals last year. Like, I thought one of them was in their goals document that to reduce disparity of expenditure per elementary student to 5% the first year, 2% the second year. But I couldn't put my hands on her goals document. Could we please get a copy of her specific goals? Because if there are metrics that can be used, I think they should be.
That would be part of our, when we are doing the goals for her. So, I mean, we already must have that.
Yes, I'll certainly forward that to everyone. I'm thinking, Mrs. Goldich, that that might be in the district improvement plan, that those metrics were in the district improvement plan.
I couldn't remember.
I think so, because there were 4 different categories in my evaluation, and at least a dozen suggested goals under each one of those, and so that's why I chose 3 umbrellas that kind of pulled a lot of those details together. But I will still be addressing each of those goals that the board set out in the evaluation. These are just the ones that you would look at more holistically, that encompass a lot of them. But all of the details, the individual goals that were in the evaluation, I will still be addressing in my self-evaluation to you. So I'll still respond that I've done them or haven't been able to, or whatever the case is, or what process we're in. But I'm thinking, I don't know if anyone else remembers, but I remember discussing that, but I think it's in the district improvement plan.
Okay.
I agree, that's where those were.
But I think since we wanted to use SMART goals for the end of the evaluation, if there are any specific metrics, we should be able to get at those. So if you could send those out, I'd appreciate it.
Ms. Sarn?
May I ask the cost of this, please?
Each of the discussions, it has gone up. It started about $1,200 when I spoke with Ms. Darcy last summer. It was about $1,800 around December, and now it's just over $2,000. And I think, do you recall how much it was per person? 175?
Something like that.
That sounds about right. I want to say it was about 175 or 195 per person per interview. And so the 3 members were thinking more like 10 people as opposed to 12 people. She was suggesting 10 to 12, and they were thinking 10.
And can I ask about a time frame as well? There are 10 interviews with people chosen and agreed upon by the board and the superintendent. So before that can happen, there needs to be some board action taken. So can I ask what the time frame is?
Right. She's actually starting to prepare her interview. She has questions. In fact, I gave you a sample of some of the things she asks. She's preparing those now in anticipation that the board would approve this and be able to go forward.
And then I would need to present a list of people, suggested people. She's given parameters of where to pull people from, and then give that to the board for approval so that we could then contact those people. I would like them to be agreeable too, that they'll do this. Because it will take 45 minutes or so.
So Ms. Darcy develops the questions to be asked?
Correct.
Is there a completion date?
Before the end of the
Before
school
the end
year.
of the school year.
Other discussion?
And where do the dollars come from? What account?
To fund the evaluation. I would imagine that's our,
I believe it's the Board of Ed budget. The line item for Board of Ed functions.
we have a dollar amount allocated to Board of Ed for conferences and legal issues and things of that nature that come out of that fund. Other discussion? Seeing none, I will call the motion to a vote by a show of hands. All in favor? And that's unanimous. Okay, item 5.0, which is curriculum. 5.1, education, evaluation, and development. Dr. Conway or Ms.
Thank you. I
Morasso?
am going to move this quickly to Mrs. Morasso. We are preparing the evaluator and document for next year, and we are following the SEED model, which is the state evaluator model.
Thank you, Dr. Conway.
If I can give Mr. Baldwin a heads up, he wants to adjust the lights so he can put up your video for you. If you could just pause, you can go ahead and talk while he's doing that.
And while he's doing that, if I could invite the members of Vernon's Educator Evaluation and Development Team to come forward. We do have seats for you here and a portable microphone. These are the individuals who have worked with me this year in understanding the new SEED model, the new core requirements, who assisted in the development of the PowerPoint that you're going to see this evening, and who are assisting in our staff's orientation to the new model of educator evaluation that will be implemented next year. So Hillary, if you want to start with an introduction.
Hi. Pass the board.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Hillary Berard, one of the behavior coaches. Hi, I'm Megan Duffy, one of the behavior coaches. Laura Wireman, K1 literacy coach. Polly Hughes, also K1 literacy coach.
I'm Pat LaPointe. I'm the special ed facilitator from the middle school, and I teach the Read 180 program.
Diane Smith, math facilitator, VCMS, and math interventionist.
Chiara Bembera, grade 5 teacher at Center Road School.
Jen Miller, math coach.
Justin Gussie, curriculum coordinator.
Jennifer Leach, 5th grade Lake Street School.
Thank you. As you are probably aware, the core requirements for educator evaluation are grounded in legislation that was passed in June of 2012. To support districts in the implementation of the core requirements, the state developed a pilot model, SEED, System for Educator Evaluation and Development. Based on our review of the state model, and we spent many meetings and countless hours this fall and through the winter, it was this team's recommendation to the superintendent that Vernon adopt the state model SEED to implement next year. Tonight we will share with you briefly what we know at this moment in time and what we've been sharing with our staff. We've put together this roadshow and have been to 4 of our 7 schools so far. I use the caveat we will share with you what we know at this moment in time because the model is still being informed by the pilot that's occurring in 10 districts across the state. And we do expect that there may be some changes through the end of the school year and perhaps even over the summer. So we'll be keeping a close eye to those changes. Research has proven that no school level factor matters more to student success than high-quality teachers. When teachers succeed, students succeed. To support teachers, we need to clearly define excellent practice and results. We need to give accurate, useful feedback about teachers' strengths and development areas. And we need to provide opportunities for growth and recognition. The purpose of the new evaluation model is to do this fairly and accurately in evaluating teacher performance, and to help each teacher strengthen his or her practice to improve student learning. There are 5 design principles guiding the model, the new SEED model. The first is that it relies on multiple standards-based measures of performance. For those of you familiar with our current model of teacher evaluation, there are really only 2 measures that are comprised of a teacher's annual evaluation. One is their professional growth objectives, and the other is classroom observations. The new SEED model includes 4 measures that will comprise a teacher's evaluation, every teacher, every year. Those 4 categories are student learning outcomes. 45% of a teacher's evaluation will be based on student learning outcomes, i.e. data. 40% of a teacher's evaluation will be comprised or based on teacher performance, observation of performance and practice. 10% of teacher's evaluation will be based on parent feedback, stakeholder feedback. And another 5% of a teacher's evaluation will be based on a school-wide learning indicator, example, the School Performance Index, the SPI, and/or student feedback. The model also aims to minimize the variance that might exist between administrators within schools and across schools. No matter where you teach in Connecticut or where you teach in Vernon, it's very important that teachers can rely on consistent and valid, observable data from their evaluators. As a matter of fact, the new SEED model requires that all evaluators participate in extensive training, 30 to 40 hours, to ensure that their observation of teacher performance is valid and reliable and consistent across schools and across districts. Another design principle is that it fosters dialogue about student learning. It encourages aligned professional development that is based on the individual needs of teachers. And finally, launching this new model will require a lot of hard work. It will require all of us to do the work differently. And it's that 5th design principle, to ensure feasibility of implementation, that is our challenge right now and has been the challenge of districts that have piloted it this year. So we're working through those challenges. This next graphic, the circle graphic, gives you an overview of the 4 categories that will comprise a teacher's evaluation each year. Again, 45% is based on student growth and development, or outcomes. 5% is based on a whole school learning indicator, the SPI, or student feedback. 40% is based on observable teacher performance and practice, and 10% is based on stakeholder feedback, specifically parent feedback. This is another graphic that displays exactly that same thing. 2 of those indicators combine to form an outcome rating of 50%. The other 2 indicators combine to form a practice rating of 50%. Those 2 ratings are combined for an overall summative rating, and the teacher at the end of the year will be rated on 4 levels: exemplary, proficient, developing, or not meeting standard. And now we'll take you briefly through each one of those components. Component 1, teacher performance and practice.
Okay, 40% of teachers' evaluation is going to be based on observation of teachers' practice and performance. And this is going to be a combination coming from both the Common Core of Teaching Standards, domains 1 and 4, 1 being planning and 4 being professional responsibilities and leadership, and also from Charlotte Danielson's framework for teaching, domains 2, which is classroom environment, and also domain 3, which is instruction. Within those 4 domains, there are 18 components that administrators will be looking for evidence for. Some sources of evidence that they they will use are observations. Those are more your formal observations, looking for evidence in domains 2, which is your classroom environment and your instruction. And then practice outside of instruction, which could be lesson plans, any reflecting you're doing on your teaching, maybe getting together for a data team meeting or a team meeting of any sort. These are more informal, and they're based upon domains 1, which is your planning, and domain 4, which is your professional responsibility and leadership. The observation process itself, we know that research says that multiple snapshots do provide the most accurate picture of performance. A majority of these observations are going to be unannounced, and that will provide evidence for domains 2 and 3. And if they are announced, there will be pre-conferences set where expectations are set, and post-conferences which will provide feedback which needs to be done within 2 days.
This slide shows the number of observations under the SEED model. And if you can look at the bottom note first, because that will be next year, for the 2013-14 school year. In the first year of implementation, all teachers will be observed 6 times. There will be 3 formal observations and 3 informal observations. Currently, the formal observation process within the classroom is a little bit longer. These 3 formal observations are approximately 30 minutes long. And the 3 informal observations that Laura discussed, being planning or attending meetings, those are shorter observations, approximately 10 minutes long. So again, in that first year of implementation, all teachers will have those 6 observations. After the total evaluation in that first year, then we go to the chart above, which shows how many observations based on the teacher category. First and second year novice teachers still need to have 3 formal observations and 3 informal observations. If after the first year a teacher is in the below standard or developing range, they will have 3 formal observations and 5 informal observations. However, if they're in the proficient or exemplary range, they have fewer formal observations, just 1, and 4 informal observations. And as part of this section of the evaluation, at the beginning of the year, teachers work to set 1 to 3 goals that are agreed upon with the evaluator, and they are aligned to the Connecticut Framework for Teaching. And it should be an area that the teacher wants to focus on and linked to student achievement. The goals should be SMART, and I heard SMART goals discussed tonight. As a reminder, SMART goals are specific or strategic, measurable, aligned, attainable, and ambitious, results-oriented, and time-bound. We've been setting SMART goals for years, so there shouldn't be anything different for us. And finally, the goals that are set at this point in the year provide focus for the observations by the evaluator and also for feedback conversations, although the evaluator will be looking for evidence in all the domains components.
The other 10%, half of the teacher's evaluation will be based on parent feedback. So I'll just take you through the process, the schedule for a year. It begins in the spring, so this time of year when the whole district is conducting the parent surveys, or really the school climate surveys. So we'll disaggregate the parent responses from those. And then when the whole staff gets back together at the very end of August or early September, the school will get together under the leadership of a building administration to develop some school-level parent goals based on that survey feedback. Those goals are based on the whole school feedback to ensure robust response rate and also some semblance of anonymity so people can respond honestly without fear of any kind of retribution or anything like that. So those goals are the school's goals and the administration's goals, the building administration's goals that will play into the administrator evaluation, which we're not talking about tonight. The teacher then, at some point in the fall, needs to work with their primary evaluator to identify one parent engagement goal that's related to the school level goals. So again, each school will have 2 or 3 goals that are really the administration's goal and the whole school goals, and each teacher will then develop a more specific one specific to their own classroom, to their own students, to their own students' parents, that's related to the school level goals. they'll monitor their progress throughout the year. The evaluator will help them do that. And at the end of the year, a summative rating will be determined. So, for example, a school-level parent goal, I'll just read it. Percentage of parents responding agree or strongly agree to, I know what my child's teachers expect of my child, on the school climate survey will increase from 58% to 70%. That may be a school-level goal that the faculty reaches consensus on, and it becomes the administrator's goal.
An example-related teacher parent engagement goal, I'll read what's on the board here. I will post clear expectations on my website and will call at least 5 parents each week to remind them about the iPass parent portal, to remind them of my website, and to ask if they have any questions about the expectations for my class. So that goal there is created by the teacher and developed more specifically for the classroom. And as Justin said, it came right from the goals that were set by the whole staff together according to the results of the survey. So in the fall, the teacher will agree with the administrator on what his or her parent engagement goal will be for the individual classroom. It's ongoing to be monitored, and here's how the progress is monitored. There's 2 different ways it can be monitored. Teachers can choose to measure how successfully they implement a strategy to address an area of need, or they can collect evidence directly from parents through interviews or surveys to measure parent-level indicators. So, A, to be more specific, would be that you would provide evidence to the administrator to show that you've reached your goal. If your goal was to call home weekly or send a note home weekly, you're going to just monitor that by logging that you did this. And if you did successfully and consistently throughout the year, you've been successful with that. Or you can do a different kind of collection where you actually interview parents and ask them for feedback. And in the end, together, the administrator is going to decide your summative rating scale according to how well you did, and it's the same as we talked about before: exemplary, proficient, developing, or below standard.
All right, the next part is basically related to our data teams that teachers have been involved with for many years. 45% of the teacher's evaluation is based on student growth and development. Part of this is developing SLOs, which are student learning objectives. These are broad goals, and they are a rationale that explains why it's an important area for improvement in their subject area or grade. And it contains at least one IAGD, which will be explained in the next slide. This is to prove or to have specific evidence with a quantitative target to determine whether the teacher met the goal that they have set. The IAGD is the indicator of academic growth and development. This basically, if you look at it, is a SMART goal. The state decided to give it another name. They like doing that. So we do actually have another SMART goal. The IAGD must make clear what evidence will be examined, what level of performance is targeted, and what proportion of students are projected to achieve the targeted performance levels. In future slides, we do have examples of these.
Okay. In the fall, the classroom teacher will begin to learn about this year's students. And in order to do that, if they have students in grades 4 through 9 or grade 11, they will look at the prior year's CMT or CAP scores. They will also look at universal screenings, diagnostic testing, placement exams, benchmarks, curriculum-based measurements, and student work portfolios. They can also tap into prior teachers and talk to them, including the artifacts from data teams, and they will make consideration of student-level characteristics that are going to impact the achievement of their students, such as special ed students and ESL students. Once they've done that in September and October, they will begin setting goals for student learning, and they will monitor their students' progress throughout the year, and they will assess the outcomes relative to the goals. In order to set those objectives, they're going to ask themselves 2 questions. Will the students they have take the CMT or the CAPT? If the answer is yes, they will, then everyone's going to create 2 SLOs. But if their students take the CM or the CAPT, one of those SLOs will be based on the standardized state test, the CMTs, and another one will be non-standardized. If the answer to the question is, do your students take another standardized assessment, and the answer is yes, they again will create 2 SLOs, one based on a standardized IAGD and one based on a non-standardized. That could be a PE teacher who has a standardized test for the state physical exam. If they are a teacher that students do not take the CMTs or another form of a standardized assessment, they will then create 2 SLOs based on non-standardized IAGDs. These are examples of SLOs, and we have numerous examples to share with the staff. These are pretty basic.
The SLOs can be derived as far as a grade level or a subject matter. So they could be, like for instance, in the middle school, the 7th grade math teachers could come up with an SLO based on a goal that they need to work on pertaining to either the CMTs or another standardized assessment. As you're looking at the IAGDs, notice the percentages, 80%, 75%, and 50%. This is where the treasure hunt becomes very important for teachers. They need to know their students very well before they set their goals. If we have, for instance, 8th grade science, 80% of the students will score at the goal level or higher on the science CMTs in the March of 2013. They did their treasure hunt. They saw that their students were meeting that or that they could obtain that goal. So they set a attainable and ambitious goal for themselves for 80% of their students to meet that goal. These are examples of non-standardized measures. So, for example, 80% of my students will demonstrate mastery of the CCSS, 2nd grade geometry skills. That's the Connecticut's Common Core state standard, by May of 2013 as measured by common unit measurements. So we have different assessments that they can use for that would be non-standardized for teachers that do not teach. For instance, 7th grade doesn't have the science CMTs, so they are using a different type of assessment to meet their IAGDs.
The last portion of the teacher evaluation is the Connecticut State gives us some choices. So district can choose to either use a whole school performance, a whole school indicator, they can use student feedback, or they can use a combination of both. Vernon has chosen the 3rd option, which is a combination. So 2.5% of a teacher evaluation will be based on whole school performance, and for most teachers, and 2.5% student feedback. The whole school indicator is basically the SPI, the School Performance Index, for most schools, and that is the aggregate of all the multiple student learning indicators that we've used, that we will be using for the principal's evaluation.
The 2.5% of Category 4 on student feedback is very similar to the parent feedback portion of SEED. The process is detailed on this slide. In the spring, a whole school student survey will be conducted. Then in the fall, the school will determine school level goals, which will become principal goals. From there, the teacher must set a specific goal for their class. The goal needs to be measurable and have ongoing measurement. And then at the year end, it is determined whether or not they met their goal, and that goes towards the teacher's summative rating. All right, an example of a school level goal is the percentage of students who agree or strongly agree with, "I know what I'm supposed to be learning in my classes," will increase from 50% to 60%. The teacher would take that goal and create a student level goal for their class. So an example of that would be, for each unit of study, I will articulate the learning targets for my students. In samplings taken no less than 5 times throughout the year, 60% of students, upon request, will be able to explain what their learning target is.
So the teacher evaluation process for the SEED model is similar to the one that we currently use in terms of time frame. In the fall, teachers will meet with their evaluators for goal setting and planning. They'll check in at the mid-year and either revise or continue with their SLOs. And then at the end of the year, there'll be an end-of-year summative review. This is another graphic displaying that same time frame. By November 15th, goal setting and planning is completed. Mid-year check-in occurs in January and February, and then by June 30th is the end-of-year review. Resulting in, at the end of the year, a rating at one of 4 levels of performance: exemplary, proficient, developing, and below standard. While we didn't discuss the administrator evaluation component of SEED this evening, their evaluation is also based on 4 components. 40% of an administrator's evaluation will be based on leadership practices, the collection of evidence of the degree to which administrators meet leadership standards. 10% will be based on stakeholder feedback, specifically parent feedback, and will be informed by the results of our school climate surveys. 45% of an administrator's evaluation will be based on student outcomes. Specifically, 22.5% will be based on the school performance index, and the other 22.5% will be based on other standardized measures. And finally, 5% of an administrator's evaluation will be based on teacher effectiveness. As a matter of fact, in order for administrators to meet this portion of their evaluation, over 60% of their teachers have to meet their goals. So this evening we're looking for your approval of SEED as the model that will guide the implementation of educator evaluation for the 2013-14 school year. With the board's approval, we will continue our learning and our preparation. We will complete the roadshow and continue to share with our staff the new information that they're going to need to understand. We'll monitor the study that's being completed by the NEAG School of Education and any changes made to the SEED model that may come as a result of that. We will plan for the administrative training of SEED that is required to ensure that our primary evaluators are calibrated and have attained proficiency. And we will research and select the electronic tool that will support the capacity for us to do this work. This is significant new learning for all of us and lots of challenges as we go forward. We're here to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Ms. Fisher.
Well, before there are any questions, I just want to make a motion that the Vernon Board of Education approve the selection of SEED, Connecticut's Educator Evaluation and Development Plan, as the model that guides educator, teacher, and administrator evaluation for the Vernon Public Schools.
I have a motion. Do I have a second on that motion? Mrs. Bush.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Discussion now on the motion or questions for the presenters. Mr. Kemp.
I don't need to ask a question yet. First, I'd like to just ask that we turn the lights up. I can't easily read what's in front of me.
Mr. Baldwin is working on that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baldwin. You have the floor, Mr. Kemp.
Debbie, I'd like to ask one question on the administrator piece of this. In the literature, it refers to 092 holders serving in central office administrative roles, in other words, other than those who are directly responsible for a building itself. How is the evaluation of those individuals to be accomplished?
The same components, the same 4 categories would also be required of them. For example, a coordinator, their 45% based on student outcomes might be based on a whole grade level in a particular content area, or that kind of thing. So the same 4 components. We're here to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Ms. Fisher.
Well, before there are any questions, I just want to make a motion that the Vernon Board of Education approve the selection of SEED, Connecticut's Educator Evaluation and Development Plan, as the model that guides educator, teacher, and administrator evaluation for the Vernon Public Schools.
I have a motion. Do I have a second on that motion? Mrs. Bush.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Discussion now on the motion or questions for the presenters. Mr. Kemp.
I don't need to ask a question yet. First, I'd like to just ask that we turn the lights up. I can't easily read what's in front of me.
Mr. Baldwin is working on that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baldwin. You have the floor, Mr. Kemp.
Debbie, I'd like to ask one question on the administrator piece of this. In the literature, it refers to 092 holders serving in central office administrative roles, in other words, other than those who are directly responsible for a building itself. How is the evaluation of those individuals to be accomplished?
The same components, the same 4 categories would also be required of them. For example, a coordinator, their 45% based on student outcomes might be based on a whole grade level in a particular content area, or that kind of thing. So the same 4 components would apply to all administrators. The student base on which they would determine their cohort would be different. A building administrator is going to base his objectives on his or her student population. A district administrator would have to identify a different kind of cohort. All grade 3 students on the CMT, all grade 5 students taking the science portion of the CMT, it would be a little bit different.
You still have floor, Mr.
I would like to have a copy of the presentation. We have some presentation materials on SEED, but it isn't in the level of detail that was presented here tonight. And I'd like to refer to it, in some time to come, based on some of the things that were shared with us. I'll yield the floor.
I see Dr. Conway taking a note, so I'm sure we'll get a copy of that in the email soon. Mrs. Arden.
Is there any information available from the districts that were piloting this model?
The NEAC School of Education is conducting a study of the 10 pilot districts, and we're putting that together now. I haven't seen anything specific yet from them.
So we don't know whether it works or not.
We know that they've experienced challenges, and that's why I'm expecting to see some slight modifications to C for next year based on those experiences.
So we'll be approving a program that will incur changes based on the state's changes, and we know what those are. Early in your presentation, you said that there will be changes made to this.
We're expecting, for example, changes hopefully in the number of observations that are required, maybe a slight reduction in this first year to help support the district's capacity to transition to this new model. We may be seeing changes in the framework. Instead of 4 domains of teaching, we may be looking at 6 domains of teaching. So there's slight modifications to the content, but ultimately the core requirements remain the same. They are written in legislation. So the 40%, the 45%, the 5%, and the 10%, there is no wiggle room around those components. Every district has to devise a plan to meet those requirements or adopt the state model SEED.
I would think reducing the number of formative evaluations would make it difficult to do accurate evaluations, though. I'm wondering if there are what models of evaluation successful systems have used. Do you have any information about that?
The SEED model and the core requirements are based on a mega study that was done nationally by the Met Foundation. They've researched the best practices in teacher evaluation across the country, and they were the ones who came up with the 5 design principles upon which the state of Connecticut has based its model. Multiple measures of performance, valid measures conducted by administrators, evaluation that supports individual learning for teachers based on their needs. Those are the 5 design principles that were informed by the research that was done by the Met study.
In the little bit of information I got from the State Department of Education, they pointed to New Haven as one of those districts that was piloting this evaluation system. And one of the results, they reported 98% of their staff were highly effective teachers. There was no bell curve. There was, so it just makes me wonder about the instrument that's being used. I should say first, though, I mean no offense to teachers by any means. That this is all the result of education evolving, and nobody has magic answers. So this is just their stab at it. So if I disagree with some things, it's not because I disagree with, okay, just want to be clear. But I think, and I'll go back to I'm going to call them the good old days, when department heads and principals and coordinators were in classrooms, all in and out, helping, listening, coaching. So I really feel what's happened is that CEA got involved and they watered down expectations and results and evaluations, and that this is what we're left with is somebody's best guess. And I wouldn't for a minute attempt to give the impression that I know what you know or more than you know. I am far from the expert, but I do think this is bogged down in alphabet soup, and common sense does no longer prevail. And I think teachers are being strapped to, quite honestly, silly expectations and goals. I happen to ascribe to give a teacher some kids, give her the tools that he needs, clear the way, and let them teach. Kids, they know what to do. They know how to function in the classroom. They know how to bring kids along. And I think this gets in the way of doing it. Not your fault. It's been thrust upon us. But I think there no longer is any room for common sense or for you teachers in the classroom to do what you know is right. Your hands are tied by all of this silly stuff. But I realize we don't have a choice. I find it annoying. And I'm not sure of the real results.
Are there other questions? I'm going to recognize the school. I'll come back to you, Mr. Kemp, but I want to try and go around, give everybody a chance, and then we'll come back for a second time.
One question I have is about the 10% parent feedback. Is there some minimum number of surveys that you need to get to ensure an adequate sample size?
Well, we certainly want as robust a response as we can, and I will say that I'm alarmed by Olivia's comment this evening about the school climate surveys. They were launched in the beginning of March, and they close on April 30th, and we've been doing everything we can to secure a robust response to the school climate surveys for certified staff, non-certified staff, for parents, and for students. Our response rates are higher than they were last year. That's a good sign, but they're nowhere near where we would want them to be. So we will continue to try to promote access to them and awareness of them. I think it's a matter of establishing a culture and a climate for that kind of thing. Parents expect that every spring, or all of our staff expects that every spring they're going to be asked for this very important feedback, because the more robust the response rates are, the more valid will be the work of our administrators and our teachers upon which to base their objectives.
Is there some help you could get from the state on what would constitute an ample survey size?
I don't know what the answer to that question is. I don't know if it's 50% or 20%. I don't know.
And my second question has to do with the SLOs and IAGDs. Do you have an example of what an SLO and IAGD set would look like for a teacher of special education?
A special education teacher would be working with a certain cohort of students and would base their SLOs on their caseload. So
that goes back to get to know your students.
Absolutely, know your students. Do that treasure hunt in the fall. Know your students where they are in terms of their achievement levels, in terms of any issues they might have behaviorally or socially, and then begin to develop objectives based on moving them from one point to another point to improve their performance.
Oh, that's what you meant by treasure hunt.
Yes.
Missed that. Thank you.
Other questions, Mrs. Bush?
Well, first off, I'd like to say that I am very pleased to see so many teachers as well as administrators that are working on this evaluation system. I think that's very important that teachers as stakeholders as well are involved deeply, and I see that you all are very deeply involved in this. One question I did have, when you do the mid-year review, I know that you can set a goal, an ambitious goal. Just curious if you can tweak your numbers. For an example, what if you didn't reach high enough and you are almost at your goal and you want to reach a little higher? Could you make an adjustment in mid-year?
Absolutely, and that's what that mid-year conference is for. Also to continue to validate that the population upon which you based your SLO is the same one that you started the school year with. It may be that as a result of student mobility, the numbers of students that you thought were going to continue through the end of the year may have changed, and may require then a change in the SMART goal for your student learning objective. But absolutely, mid-year time is a time to look at that objective and to make any modifications as necessary with your administrator.
Ms. Nolan?
Just to kind of talk a little bit about, yes, it is a mandated thing. Yes, it has come down from the state. And it is in our world now. But a positive note that I'd like to take on this is administrators and people evaluating will be in the classrooms. And I can see this as an evaluative tool, but I also see it as the ability to give positive suggestions and things like that as well, so that will help grow the teachers. And so I don't look at this as something that is going to hurt our teachers. I think it will ultimately be something that is a positive for our teachers as well.
Thank you. Ms. Marshall?
I would agree with you, Mrs. Bush. In the research, those districts that have implemented this well and with fidelity have demonstrated increased student achievement. So I am very excited about the potential for this, if done well, to improve student achievement and to improve teacher learning.
Other questions? Mr. Kemp, back to you.
If I could ask about the teacher evaluation piece of this now. The comments made a moment ago indicated that it's a mandated thing and that we're stuck with it. I guess my first question is, at this late stage, why is the state requesting the Board of Ed or Boards of Education to approve this particular process? That was not a requirement of us up until very recently, I think.
Ms. Marashall?
Actually, I didn't think that adopting the SEED model would require Board of Education approval. If you take a look at the last page in your packet, we had understood as the guidelines were being rolled out that if a district is going to implement SEED, the whole model with all of its staff for next year, that all we needed to do is notify the State Department of that. Since that time, they've come out with additional guidance that requires now the form that indicates
what our district intends to do for next year to be signed off by the chair of the Board of Education. So we're trying to, accommodate this new request from the State Department by informing the board of our intention to implement SEED next year and secure the appropriate approvals.
Thank you for your honest answer. I didn't know I was here to accommodate the State Board of Education. Now, let me say that on the last page here, there's an indication that we actually had choices. And I'd like to ask why we chose the one that we did. One of the choices is the whole model full implementation district-wide. And I'd like to know why we chose that one versus at least 1/3 of the schools, et cetera, or 50% of schools, classroom teachers only model. And finally, the locally determined option, because at this late stage to be asked to approve this, one might jump to the conclusion it's a fait accompli, but now that I realize that we had a local option to develop an evaluation system on our own, I didn't know that. I thought that it was seed or no seed, one flavor, and that's it. But apparently that's not so. So my first question is, why are we going full implementation district-wide up front?
We didn't really see any advantage to doing a partial implementation. It raises questions like which staff won't be evaluated by the new model, which staff will be evaluated by the new model. Will that create a distinction in the types of staff we have? We felt it was more important to jump in with both feet with all of our staff and do the new learning together.
Dr. Conway, did you have anything you wish to add?
Yes, I did. Thank you for answering that part of the question. The districts in the state that are doing a locally grown model, so to speak, have been working on these for the most part for several years. So these are towns who have been working without waiting for the guidelines. The guidelines were only approved last June. And we have been waiting for the guidelines to see where we were going to go with them. It's a huge investment to do that. So we have South Windsor right next door, several districts across the river who are creating their own model, have been creating their own rubrics and everything. They now have to take their model and make sure that it does follow the core guidelines, which are in the document that you received in your packet. And so, and some of them do not have quite the core guidelines and have to change the model they've been working on. As another example, Manchester did not have a model, had not been working on it, and they invested heavily in a consultant who came out and met multiple days with multiple teachers and groups of teachers to create their model over the course of the year. It cost them quite a bit of funding to do that, both in terms of substitute teachers and in terms of the consultant. And so they did create their own model and are here, and I didn't feel we had the resources to do something like that at this late date. Even at the beginning of the year, I didn't feel we had the resources to do that, to pull that many people out.
With the changes that may come about, or with the results that Manchester went and paid for, or South Windsor went and paid for, should this be approved by this Board of Ed this evening, to what extent do we have an option to adopt a solution that we find more advantageous than the one in front of us?
We have informed the state that we intend to, with your approval, follow the SEED model in the first year. It is my understanding from the state that we are now going to submit this every year as opposed to every 10 or 12 years. And so next spring we will have another opportunity. The way I'm looking at SEED this year is really looking at it as our pilot year. Let's go forward, follow the model with fidelity. It is research-based, and hopefully we're going to find a lot of good things in this model. But as the year goes on next year, the discussions will go on. This committee in front of you, as well as others, will be discussing the merits of each portion of the model, and to see where do we need to change our model and to make it our own. We may also be looking at different rubrics. Right now, the state has just created, we have the Charlotte Danielson rubric. The state is creating another set of rubrics. we may look at one of the other, a Marzano rubric, a Marshall rubric, that we may feel better suits our needs. And so it is going to be ongoing. It is going to be, I would bet it'll be 3 or 4 years before we're really liking our model.
The nuts and bolts of this require several observations per year. Could you give me an idea of how many FTEs we currently employ and how many times they're observed each year, roughly?
We have approximately, I'm sorry, 350 certified staff members.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. What?
We have approximately 350 certified staff members who will require 3 formal observations of 30 minutes in length and 3 informal observations of approximately 10 minutes in length.
Right. And how many times are they evaluated currently?
It depends on what cycle of our current evaluation phase that they're on. If they're non-tenured teachers in the appraisal phase, they each get 3 formal observations of anywhere from 45 to 84 minutes, a full class period. If they're on the professional growth year 1 phase, they get 1 classroom observation. Other teachers, their evaluation is not based on observations, but it's based on their professional growth objectives.
If these are since these are not FTEs, the 350, when you have a person who's a 0.4 or point something 5 or 6 or 7, to what extent would they receive observation if they're only fractional employee?
My understanding is they will be fully evaluated just like any other teacher. They receive tenure in the same way. It takes a little longer to receive tenure at 3.4, but they will be evaluated just like any other teacher.
Mm-hmm. The goals that will be set for each student, Vernon has a very high churn rate of students who come and go into our system compared to other towns. If we receive a student mid-year, does the goal set for that student come with that student? Or in other words, do we have to honor the goal set elsewhere?
The teacher establishes the goal for his or her set of students.
Yeah, but we don't have the student to start the year, so I'm talking about the ones we don't begin with.
So if I'm a classroom teacher and my student learning objective and indicator of academic growth and development is that 75% of my students will meet goal on the reading portion of the CMT, and I have a new student who moves in who might be far from that particular goal standard, I might change my data point to 73% or 72%. You have an opportunity to adjust it based on the cohort of students, the classrooms of students that you have. Objectives need to be reasonable but ambitious.
All right. Thank you. The observation material that I have in front of me in this packet indicates that observations will be based on the discretion to decide the right number of observations based on school and staff needs in accordance with the STEAM handbook. So what I saw until this presentation was that the observations would vary. And in tonight's presentation, it indicates 3 formal and 3 informal. So which is it going to be?
That's in year 1, it is informal and informal. And then once a teacher is rated in one of the 4 categories, then they vary after that.
So in other words, you're going to get a baseline.
You're going to get a baseline the first year. That's why every teacher needs to be evaluated.
Well, I have to say, I don't like having to put my seal of approval on something that I didn't know was going to be asked of me until this 11th hour. And if you're telling me we have a right to revisit this yearly, okay, you're viewing it as our pilot of this. But I would very much like to see how this pilot, let's call it, is playing out within that first year, so that we're not presented with something to approve or not approve at the 11th hour, as I feel we're being asked to do at this point in time. That's all I have for the moment, thank you.
Any, Ms. Sarn?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Mrs. Marassa. I jotted down real quickly administrator's evaluation. And
Could you
gave-
pull your mic closer, please? Focus
Sorry.
on the back of the
I'm addressing administrator evaluations and the percentages, and you mentioned 5% would be based on teacher performance,
Teacher effectiveness.
effectiveness, okay. And that being 60% of their staff will meet the goal.
60%, over 60% of their staff must meet their student learning objectives in order for the administrator to meet the standard for that particular indicator.
Over 60%. So would that be the expectation in a building that 60% of staff would be highly effective or meets?
Proficient, yes.
Okay. Is that an aggressive number? 60%?
That's the way it's written right now into the seed model.
But I mean pertaining to Vernon, what you know, is 60% an ambitious goal?
I think we'll find out.
Other discussion? Questions? There is a motion on the floor, and I'm going to bring that motion to a vote, and that is to approve for the upcoming year the seed model as the evaluation model Vernon is going to be pursuing. I'm going to ask for a show of hands, all in favor? And those opposed? I think that was unanimous, but it was a slow unanimous. Thank you. Yeah, it was unanimous, yes. Thank you for your presentation this evening. Ms. Marassa, do you have any other presentation for this upcoming? Mr. Baldwin's going to get the room in order again for you.
Excellent.
You have the floor. Oh, sorry, he's got to pull the screen. Oh, I
Mr.
apologize.
Holt, this one is just a verbal presentation. It will be the following one that will be on the, you could change the order.
I was going to say, Ms. Marassa, if you could move ahead, we're going to jumble these two. I thought we had your presentation next, so if you could bring your presenters forward if you have. This is for, we're going right to instruction first, and I apologize, folks, because it's another presentation. 5.3, I apologize.